Hello again. Welcome to World Talks on TVP World. My name is Anna Kalczyńska. According to the White House, Vladimir Putin agreed to meet with Volodymyr Zelenskyy to discuss peace. But as much as the US President Donald Trump is pushing for an agreement that would end the devastating war in Ukraine, it seems that Russia tries to slow down the process. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's latest interview seems to suggest that prior to the real talks, expert meeting is required. Peter Zalmayev, director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, joins us now to discuss where we are in the process of resolving the conflict and whether progress is actually being made. So good evening, sir, and thank you for joining us here on the platform of TVP World.
Happy to be here.
So on one hand, we have leaks from the White House, where there's speculation already as to the venue of the potential peace talks between the two leaders. On the other, we have the foreign minister talking about a calm process, expert talks. So where are we in this peace process?
Well, that's been precisely the goal, I believe, of Putin's ostensible engagement with Donald Trump. Everything he has done, every step of the way, he's been trying to buy himself some time to continue with his counteroffensive. He has not given up the goal of gobbling up more of Ukraine's territory to press his advantage on the battlefield. And Russia is advancing, albeit still at a very bloody pace that cost Russia quite a bit in terms of blood and treasure, up to 1,000 soldiers on certain days lost as dead or wounded. But Putin never really cared about that. So he is definitely trying to press his advantage from all appearances. I don't think he's interested in ending this war anytime soon. He just doesn't see the benefits of that as of yet. He's got China's full backing. And so at the same time, he doesn't want, of course, any more sanctions from the West. He does not want America to start rearming Ukraine at an increased pace, something that Donald Trump, if you recall, promised during his election campaign, right? And so he's doing just enough to keep Donald Trump kind of distracted and hopeful for some impending breakthrough. And now, of course, Putin does not want to appear the recalcitrant party, the party that is against peace, that's against meeting with Zelenskyy either one-on-one or in the trilateral meeting, etc. So they're offering all these other formula. Then Putin apparently promised something that is completely unacceptable to any side in this, and that's a meeting in Moscow, knowing full well that Zelenskyy will not go for that. And that's like walking into a trap, never to return alive. And so this is, I think, what is happening. The question is when and how soon and whether Donald Trump will realize that that is what is being done.
So Putin doesn't seem to see any benefits, you say, so he doesn't really want to end this war. But he seems to be kind of cornered, after all, after the Washington meeting and previously in Alaska. So what is the key takeaway from the last events, according to you? What do you make of it?
Well, the last events, at least prevented the worst from happening, right? So there was an audible sigh of relief in Ukraine that the worst didn't happen. That would have been another blow up, another confrontation between Zelenskyy and Trump, sort of what we saw in the Oval Office a few months ago. Zelenskyy came prepared. He came wearing a suit of a sort, still did not wear a tie. He came very well prepared with his speech. His English had considerably improved. And of course, he was very clever to butter up Donald Trump with this promise, this pledge to buy up to $90 to $100 billion worth of American weaponry using Europe's money. And then actually also offering to sell U.S. some Ukrainian-made drones. And this is all, of course, music to Donald Trump's ear. Once again, Donald Trump is fickle, he's impulsive, and already he's sounding different notes than what we heard. And there was already talk about some security guarantees. That was very, of course, very positive development. But now Donald Trump has apparently ruled out at least the sending of U.S. troops at any point in this. And so, of course, we can expect another meeting between Trump and Putin, and then God knows what he will be saying then. But once again, the worst appears to have been, for now, averted. But then the question remains, what are the preconditions for these talks? Why Vladimir Putin insists on a full peace agreement rather than a ceasefire for now? Why can the two parties engage in talks with a ceasefire, right? And we all know the answer. For Vladimir Putin, all this talk about a peace that would address the root causes of the conflict means essentially Ukraine's capitulation. It means Ukraine's army being downsized to about 100 or under 1,000 men and women under arms. It would mean the reinstatement of the Russian language as one of the official languages. It would mean no to NATO, any other alliances, and essentially Moscow's control over Ukraine's foreign policy choices. It would mean new elections, on and on and on and on. And my, dismay is that Donald Trump, the American president, has been rebroadcasting these wishes to make it sound like, well, I mean, if we can have a full peace agreement, why not go for that? The big price, why bother with the ceasefire? But at root, this is not what's happening. And Russia is cleverly inserting these code words that mean something other than the American president either understands or pretends that he understands.
All right, so let's elaborate on this for a second. So why Putin differentiates between ceasefire and peace deal, and why did Donald Trump adopt this optic of Vladimir Putin so easily after one meeting?
Well, the first, to answer the first part of the question is Vladimir Putin once again sees there's a certain momentum in the war. Once again, there's movement on the front. There was a near breakthrough the Ukrainian lines, even though it was contained eventually. And so for him to freeze it at this point would be to lose momentum, to allow the Ukrainians to to entrench, literally to dig more fortifications, etc. And so that would be losing that advantage. And so that, he does not, obviously does not want that. He still hopes that not only will Russia be able to gain considerably more land in this summer offensive, which is, of course, now gradually morphing into a fall offensive, right? But he actually thinks that the Ukrainian armed forces may fold and may just collapse at some point, and then Donald Trump will be calling on Putin, Vlad, come in and restore order. You can never discount dictators, fixation on issues and his fervent belief that at the end he will prevail at whatever the cost. And the second question is, of course, more esoteric. And you ask me why Donald Trump is doing that, what he's doing. And that's $1 million question. It's a question everyone is asking. What may have been discussed in that limo, in that private ride without any translators or any entourage whatsoever. The two men were sitting together in the Beast, Donald Trump's fabled limo. We don't know what they talked about. I don't want to be speculative here or hype it up, but we also know that Donald Trump is a transactional president. He's already shown his willingness to accept gifts, so to speak, if, there's a harsher word for that, bribes, but let's not go there. The plane from Qatar and other things, even starting during his first term. And you remember this has been his lifelong dream, or the dream of his career, to build a high rise in Moscow, right? He had traveled to Moscow a few times before he became president. So, those are my conjectures, but they're as good as any. You can also say that the two are ideologically aligned in their fight against woke progressivism, the left agenda. There's much to be, admired from each other, as they think, and some of the people from Trump's coalition openly admire Vladimir Putin. But once again, maybe it's a combination of these factors. Maybe it's one of them. Hopefully, eventually, history will, show us what exactly the motivation is. Finally, I've also thought of another possible, and that's actually an important one, and that is this persistent idea within the Trump coalition that they will be able, with this approach, by rolling out this red carpet to literally to Vladimir Putin in Alaska and other things, to decouple Moscow from Beijing. Because China, according to Donald Trump, now is America's greatest threat. So they need to decouple it and get Russia on its side. We can discuss that. I think it's a dangerously naive and unrealistic idea, but it is a salient idea within Trump's circles.
All right. So let's discuss now the security guarantees. The U.S. President told President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Monday that United States would help the Europeans and would help guarantee Ukraine's security in any deal to end Russia's war there. Though the extent of any assistance isn't clear. What do you make of this? What would be the scope of this assistance on the part of U.S.?
Well, the assistance is, of course, once again, a lot of... pardon.
It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah.
What I think is particularly positive in all of this is that so far the formula has held that Europe will be paying for American-made weaponry for Ukraine. That is essential. And the fear was that the worst outcome of this Monday meeting would be that Donald Trump would simply just have a temper tantrum and say no more weapons for Ukraine, even if you're willing to pay for them. Well, so far, that is not the case.
Hopefully.
If Europeans are willing to continue paying for the weaponry, and they are, and they're willing to do so, and the Americans will continue, selling weapons for Ukraine, Ukraine will resist for quite some time yet, right? That's winning us time, So this is very crucial. Once again, Europe can afford to support Ukraine. It's only a fraction of their defense budgets, and increasingly, Europeans, and they've demonstrated it by this trip to Washington. They see that Ukraine's security means their security. I'm speaking on the Polish channel, and the Polish people know Ukrainians very well. Several million Ukrainians have come over to Poland. They've gotten jobs, and they've successfully integrated into society. But imagine a few more million Ukrainians in Poland and elsewhere in Europe should Ukraine fail. That would create significant tensions, right? Humanitarian, political, social, cultural, for these countries. That will be a dire scenario, which Europeans know they need to avoid. And then consider, finally, what will happen once this resurgent Russia, engorged with Ukraine, right, will, able to use Ukraine now to press Ukrainian men into service, to serve in its army. Russia essentially will be threatening Europe from its very doorstep.
Definitely. I would like to pursue also another idea of sending European troops to Ukraine. This idea obviously is vividly opposed by the Kremlin. However, what if NATO soldiers were to protect Ukrainian civilians and were placed in respective Ukrainian cities?
All these are great ideas, and we early in the war, remember, we were discussing no-flight zones, and now we've broached finally this topic of peacekeepers, and there was early on in this discussion about a few months ago Zelenskyy mentioned the figure of 200,000 who would be needed. Obviously, that sounds like an unrealistic figure, and it's not clear who would come up with that sort of a number. But at least the leaders of Britain and France have started talking about the possibility of sending their troops. But once again, seems to be a non-starter with the Russians. And once again, it was reiterated today through several interlocutors of the Kremlin that it is a non-starter. They will not countenance, they will not tolerate the presence of troops from the so-called hostile countries. And that means, Britain, that means any European country, essentially. So we can talk all we want about this formula, but I think it's a moot point because I don't think Kremlin has sent any signals that it would be amenable to this idea.
All right. Peter Zalmayev, thank you so much, sir. We are unfortunately run out of time, but thank you very much for this interesting conversation and for your insights tonight. Director of Eurasia Democracy Initiative has been our guest here on World Talks, TVP World. Thanks you once again. And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned to TVP World for more news and other interesting features. See you soon.